Hello, and welcome to another episode of Injustice For All MMA. My name is David, and this is for UFC 259, Adesanya versus Blachowicz, or Blachowicz versus Adesanya. And this card is a good reason why I started doing this. Because, like I reiterated before, in the past I would just see inconsistent scorecards that would just kind of baffle me and make me think, what's really going on? How are they scoring this? What are they doing? And I thought to myself, this is just a great reason why I'm doing this. Again, I'm not a judge. This is more like a fan thing, really, in how I score the cards. I want to acknowledge that I do have a possible advantage that the judges don't have, which is I'm looking through the UFC screen and their cage side. I don't know if they have a screen or if they're just looking through the cage, but I do acknowledge that I do have an advantage, but our scorecards still come out pretty much the same, so there is really no excuse. Again, the point of this isn't to crap on judges, but to just point out that there's some flaws in a lot of their scores, and that they could do a lot better. A lot better. There's some things I want to talk about. Inflated scorecards. There was a sort of perception that Blachowicz's scorecard was inflated. We'll get to that. Inconsistency. A lot of talk about 10-8s. There were some good 10-8s. There were some bad 10-8s. But there's a feeling, though, that some of these judges really want to give out 10-8s. And they want to give it out for times where it's not really needed. There are times where it's needed. There are times where it's not needed. And sometimes I feel as though if they're not feeling the fight, if the fight doesn't really tip in one person's favor, I feel like they just throw a 10-8 out there. We'll get to that. And this is every week. This is every week. This has been happening since, I believe, the start of 2020. Maybe that May card, when we started seeing scorecards being just inconsistent. And again, that scorecard was in Florida, and then there's just been a lot of judging in Vegas where I feel as though they should be getting it right by now. There have been cards every week in Vegas. So many cards that they should have practice on this. So many decisions in Vegas that they should have practice on this. Again, this is Injustice For All MMA. We talk about decisions that I disagree with. And I'm noticing on my scorecard, there are very few. In fact, in this scorecard, there's just one that I disagree with. But the rest mostly comes with honorable mentions, which are individual rounds, which I feel as though were scored incorrectly. So we'll just go into the first fight that I thought was essentially an injustice. And that was Santos versus Rakic. Now, I will acknowledge the fight may be perceived as a bit of a snoozer and a bit of a more technical fight, where both fighters were a little hesitant to kind of go in, which is why I could see why some people weren't mad at the Rakic score and giving him the win. But there is a big injustice in the way this fight was scored. And let me just read off the scorecards for that. Eric Colon had 29-28 Rakic. Dave Hagen had 29-28 Rakic. And Ron McCarthy probably the worst scorecard, had 30-27 Rakic. Now, I had this fight scored 29-28 Santos. Okay, and he gave all three rounds to Rakic. Now, Eric Colon and Dave Hagen gave the third round to Santos, as did I. That's two judges that agree with me. And in that fight, Santos was obviously, one could argue he was down, but I had him winning the first round. The first round was very leg kick oriented for Rakic. And while Santos was also fighting back a little bit, he landed the more heavier shots in that first round, enough to where I gave him the first round. Very little action in that first round, but enough to where he got it for sure. In the second, Rakic continued by pushing the pace as he did in the first, but the difference between the first and the second for me in terms of pushing the pace was he was definitely landing more in the second. And in the first, while he was landing and walking him down, Santos still had him on better significant strikes in that first round. And then the third, Santos just landed the heavier shots. And again, while it looked as though Rakic was pushing the pace, I don't think he won the fight. The biggest injustice here is definitely from Ron McCarthy, who had him just sweeping the whole card. Dave Hagen and Eric Colon, again, had the third round for Santos, but overall, I think this is the biggest injustice of the night, not giving Santos the nod. All right, that's the only fight I disagreed with entirely. Now we're going to go straight to the prelims and go on some honorable mentions. Now, in the honorable mentions, this isn't... a lot of these are disagreements with the scorecards, but some of these are just what-ifs also, if the round would have continued and not have been a TKO or a KO or a sub. The first honorable mention would be Souza versus Lemos. Obviously, Lemos wins by TKO, but if that round were scored at the end, it's obvious. It's obvious. I mean, no one would blink if they gave a 10-8, maybe even a 10-7. I don't think they should have given a 10-7, but if this fight was scored, this would have been an obvious 10-8. Lemos was walking her down. I mean, the entire round. Walked her down, pieced her up, and you saw the fight. It was enough. It was enough to where if that fight ended, I wouldn't be surprised if a judge stupidly put a 10-7, but it was obvious that every scorecard would have reflected a 10-8. Souza didn't throw anything. Or if she did throw anything, it didn't land. And Lemos just had her. So that's the first honorable mention. Basically, if the fight was scored, it would have been a 10-8 in that first round. The second honorable mention is Brady versus Matthews. Let me read you the scorecard for that one. Mike Bell had it 2017 for Brady. Derek Clearly had it 2018, and Ron McCarthy also had it 2018. I think this, I believe the injustice here in this goes to Mike Bell for the 10-8. Again, we're doing this 10-8 thing, and I understand it's because in the first it's pretty even, right? In fact, Matthews is winning the first. Up until Brady takes him down and controls him for that second half of the round, and it's obvious that Brady would take the round. It then goes on to where Brady understands, okay, I'll just wrestle you. And he wrestles him for the majority of this round, but it's not a domination. It's not enough to give him a 10-8. This is where we get into that weird part where I guess judges just look at the clock and go, oh, is he wrestling him in this larger half? Now, if he's not killing you in that larger half, there's no 10-8. There's no need. There's absolutely no need to give him a 10-8. That's just a freebie 10-8. If this fight were to be reversed, or if, let's say, Brady doesn't take him down in that first, and Matthews is obviously winning, I mean, even in the second, Matthews was kind of hitting him a little bit right before he takes him down. But let's say in that first, Matthews wins and it's a 10-9. Then in that second round, Mike Bell just gives him a 10-8 for no reason at all. This is where we get these weird split decisions, these weird people are confused over who won. There's no need for a 10-8 here. Brady wins the round, 10-9 for sure. And eventually he wins the match. So the right person won. And I believe that should be it. And another thing is, if the round would have continued, I could definitely see a 10-8 in the third. That, I believe a 10-8 in the third would have made a lot of sense. Because he gets the knockdown, and then he delivers great ground and pound. So makes sense to give him a 10-8 in the third, but not in the second. We move on to another fight. That's Elliott versus Espinosa. Again, it's an honorable mention, so the right person won. But this is where we get into when you should give a 10-8 and when you shouldn't give a 10-8. And one judge had it correct. Okay. I'll read out the scorecards. Mike Bell had it 30-27. Saul D'Amato had it 30-27. And Chris Lee, who I believe had the purest correct scorecard, had it 30-25. Now, I don't know what Mike Bell and Saul D'Amato were thinking when in the second and in the third he took him down and controlled him. But the reason why it's a 10-8 for those two rounds is because when he took him down in the second and the third, Espinosa isn't fighting back. Espinosa is staying in that position, and Espinosa isn't attacking from the bottom. Okay, Espinosa, while he's trying to get up, obviously, is stagnant. He's not moving. He's not active on the bottom, right? I like to refer back to like the Kunitskaya fight versus Vieira. I think that's a great reference to use when people get taken down, right? Obviously, it's a little different. It's a women's and men's fight, so it's a bit different. But Kunitskaya was active. I mean, taken down in the first. She was somewhat active, but she wasn't active enough to win that round in the first. But in the third round, she was so active. The judges said, "Yo, we had to give it to you. We had to give it to you." She was too active, to the point where she reversed position and then cut her open big. So that makes sense. But in this fight, it's obvious that you give Elliott a 10-8 because he's just dominating Espinosa in the second and in the third. Most definitely in the third. In the second also, he has less time in the second, but in the third he has all the time. And that's enough to give him a 10-8 in both of those rounds. I think the biggest injustice on this scorecard was not giving him a 10-8 for those last two rounds by Mike Bell and Saul D'Amato. Another honorable mention. No, I'll skip that one. Another honorable mention will be Benavidez versus Askarov. My score, I had this 30-27 for Askarov. And for the judges, Derek clearly had a 30-27, Saul D'Amato had a 30-26, and Tony Weeks had a 30-26. The biggest injustice, obviously, is Saul D'Amato with the random 10-8 in the second round. The random 10-8. Look, Benavidez was losing the fight, obviously, but he never got destroyed. This is this weird thing where I guess if you see something really big and flashy, I believe in the second he like pounces on him, and he's hitting him a little bit on the ground. But Benavidez is still active. Benavidez is still moving. There is no part in that fight where Benavidez is just like laying down and taking it. Okay, this isn't him versus Figgy, Davidson Figueiredo. This is he's still active and he's still in this fight. So for Saul D'Amato to give him a 10-8 in the second randomly, because they're kind of just, they're striking, and then all of a sudden there's a big action. You can't just give people 10-8s for big actions out of nowhere. Okay, it has to be for a significant amount of time, and the other person isn't doing anything, but he's doing something. You can't give a 10-8 for that. They're giving out 10-8s like candy, and in this instance, they're just sprinkling it all over the cards. It's stupid. It makes no sense. So that's another injustice. We'll move down to another fight on this card, and that's Dominick Cruz versus Casey Kenney. I have this 29-28 for Cruz, and the judges had it. Mike Bell had it 29-28 Kenney. Derek clearly had it 29-28 Cruz, and Saul D'Amato had it 30-27. Now, this scorecard might be one of it's all over the place. It's all over the place. Obviously, it's not a big injustice because the right person won, but it's really all over the place. In that second round, Casey Kenney is obviously winning. He's pushing the pace. He's landing more. I understand, and here's the fancy thing about it is when you look at the post-fight numbers, right? It's really easy to look at the post-fight numbers for a lot of these fights, actually. Even the Rakic fight. It's really easy to look at these post-fight numbers and go, well, he definitely won there. Yeah, when you look at the post-fight numbers, it's easy. But remember, these judges don't have the numbers in front of them. We're watching with our eyes. It's not fair if a judge looks up at the big screen, sees the numbers, and goes, let me erase this number. That would be stupid. You cannot do that. Even in the Adesanya fight that's coming up, you just can't do that. That's just not how that works. But you can still get a feel for this fight in the second round, where Kenney is obviously landing shots at a better pace, and he's landing them more significantly. In that first round, Cruz is evasive. He's sticking and moving. He's doing his thing. And he obviously wins the first round. And in that first round, two judges got it right, exactly like me. And then in the second round is where I'm sorry, back to the first round. They give it to Kenney, who, while Kenney was hitting, he was missing a lot, and Dom was connecting. So I don't see what Mike Bell was looking out there in that first one. In the second, Saul D'Amato gives it for Dom. Again, just another weird scorecard where the two judges obviously give it to Kenney for the right reason, and then Saul D'Amato just gives it to Dom. Okay. We move to the third, where Cruz definitely wins the third. I could see where I could see an argument in that end where Kenney wins the third, because Kenny's hitting him, and at the very end, But Dom is still in there. And at the very end, Dom gets the takedown, which just finishes it, and that's his round. And the unique thing about this one is obviously all three judges had that for Dom. This scorecard is all over the place, but the right person won again, so there's no problem there. And then we go to the next injustice. This isn't an injustice. This is more like I guess just an observation. Sadly, we go to the Peter Yan versus Aljamain fight, where this scorecard is probably a little fluffy. It's actually really bad when I look at it for the first time. On my scorecard, I had Yan winning the first, second, and third, and he was definitely possibly, the way the fight was looking, possibly looking like a 10-8, but let's say it was about 2 minutes into that fight, I believe, so I can't really give a definitive score for that fourth round, but he gets DQ'd in the fourth, obviously. But I had the first 3 rounds, and they're fairly easy to score these first 3 rounds. He knocks him down in the first. He knocks him down twice in the second. And while Aljo's output is what maybe put these judges on a little bit, it's still not enough when Yan is still firing back, still landing cleanly, and is knocking him down. It's weird. Because on my scorecard, it's 30-27 so far. And when you read out these scorecards, it's crazy. It's 29-28. So for Derek Clearly, he gives a 10-9 to Sterling in the second, where he gets knocked down a bunch. Same for Saul Diamata again. And same for Ron McCarthy. I'm a little confused how Derek Clearly and Saul Diamata can give Yan the first round, but not give him the second, when he was arguably much more active in the second. I believe he had some takedowns in the second. And in the third. They have their third scorecard correct, right? They have the third round correct. But in the second, Yan was doing work, and they just gave Aljamain the round. It's a shame that this fight didn't finish, but this scorecard is so all over the place. It just makes zero sense. Because for my scorecard, it's literally a 30-27, and these guys just shuffle back and forth. I'm looking at this scorecard, and I'm just thinking, in the first round, which you could argue you could give it to Aljamain. You could give it to Aljamain, maybe, right? Maybe Ron McCarthy has a case. But how in the world are you Saul Diamata and Derek Clearly, and you give Peter Yan the first, but then don't give him the second round, where he's much better? I don't think these judges are actually watching this might be, in fact, we're changing it. This is an injustice. This is a big injustice. This isn't an honorable mention. This is a big injustice. This scorecard is actually fucked. There's no way you watch the first round. You could go, you could give it to anyone. And then you look at the second, where Yan puts it on. And then you go, we'll just, 2 judges give it to Aljamain. Essentially, they had it tied going into the third. This is, at a certain point, I have to stop blaming like Vegas judges. It has to just be no one's paying attention. I used to think it was like weird separate. No, these are like established. This is Derek Clearly, who judges almost every fight. Saul Diamata, who judges almost every fight. Chris Lee, Mike Bell. I mean, you have just inconsistent scorecards. Just really inconsistent scorecards that make no sense. All right, and now we'll go to the final honorable mention. Again, this is an honorable mention because the right person won, but the scorecard is really tough. It's really tough. My scorecard for this was 48-47 for Blachowicz versus Adesanya, having Blachowicz win. I had this tied going into the fifth. I understand a lot of people had it tied going into the fifth, but I had the first round for Adesanya. Clearly, I think he was pushing the pace. He was kind of hitting from distance. Definitely his round. And then the second, Jan was landing. Jan was a little more active in that second round. In the third, Adesanya, same thing. Same thing as the first, really. Just landing more, pushing him down, pushing the pace, excuse me. And it's obvious in the fourth and the fifth round who won that. It was back and forth a little bit, and then Blachowicz just takes him down, and Adesanya had no answer for it. Same in the fifth round, where he got him down a little late, I believe. I want to remember correctly. I believe he had more time in the fifth than he did in the fourth. Someone correct me if I'm wrong, but no, I believe he had more time in the fourth than he did in the fifth, actually. And he just went a little wild in the fifth round. But it's still a 10. It's absolutely still a 10-9. And this is where we get to everyone whining about the scorecards. In that first round, it's so close. It's so close that I can see how someone gives the first to Adesanya. I can see how someone gives the first to Adesanya. No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I can see how someone gives the first to Blachowicz, but I gave it to Adesanya. Everyone else, all the other judges, gave it to Blachowicz. In the second, again, two judges saw it the way I did, 10-9s, 10-9s, and then Camijo had the second for Adesanya, which is a little weird, but, you know, that's fine. And then Camijo's card is probably the most confusing. He has the second round as a 10-9 for Adesanya, and then a 10-9 in the third for Blachowicz, when, in my opinion, it's really inverted. He just switched two of the winners on those scorecards. Blachowicz was winning the second, and Adesanya was winning the third, and he gives the opposite for those people. So, again, I don't know what the fuck he's watching. I don't even think he's watching the fight on those two rounds, but whatever. Again, for Saul Diamant and Derek Clearly, they give Blachowicz the first. I just don't think he gets the first. Adesanya's he's just striking from a distance, and he's the most active, and he's pushing the pace. It's obvious that it's his round. It's obvious that it's his round. So I don't know what they're watching either. And then we get to the last round, which is what everyone's mad about, which is how the scorecards look at the end. So I'll read the whole scorecards. It's 49-45. Derek Clearly, 49-46. Saul Diamant in the 49-45. So this is where we get into it's kind of inflated. They gave an extra round to Jan. When Jan won 3 rounds straight. Like, objectively speaking, he won 3 rounds. Not straight, but he won 3 rounds. He won the second in my book, and he won the last 2, obviously. But what everyone's getting mad about is the 10-8s, and this is where we get into what I said back in the Askarov fight, where one small action dictates I mean, in the same, if I could go back Askarov fight, right? Salty Amato gives a 10-8 for that second. Nobody else gave a 10-8 for that. Salty Amato gives a 10-8. There's no need for a 10-8. One small little action indicates a 10-8. In that instance, you might as well have just given a 10-8 to Kunitskaya for that last second action she had at the third round where she busted her open. There's no need for that 10-8 there. But back to that final round. Apparently, Derek clearly gives Blachowicz a 10-8, and I assume it can only be for the flurry at the end, the ground and pound. Because in the fourth round, there's not a lot of ground and pound. He takes him down, which is what wins him the round, but there's very little ground and pound, right? Because once Adesanya gets taken down, he's a little active on the bottom, and then he realizes, I'm not getting up. Okay, 10-9 for Blachowicz. In the fifth round, he takes him down. Adesanya's like, okay, I gotta look to get up. He doesn't. I'm sorry, in the fifth round. And Blachowicz in that final, last 10 seconds, just goes crazy. And while he is landing, there's no doubt he's not landing. He's landing, but it's not a 10-8. He didn't dominate him. It's absolutely not a 10. There's no need for a 10-8 there. Salty Amato gets it right by putting a 10-9 in that fifth round. But then again, Kamijo, I don't know if he's watching. I don't even know if Derek clearly's watching, but he gives a 10-8 in that last round, and it can only possibly be for that slight action at the very end. There's a lot of complaining about the scorecard because it looks inflated. It looks inflated because all three judges gave him an extra round. And there's no. He just doesn't get an extra round there. I think it's 48-47. And by two judges giving him an 8 at the end, it makes the scorecard look a little worse than it's supposed to be. But obviously, the right person won, and that's what matters. The right person won. So, this was a good card to showcase how weird these scorecards have been coming up. In the past, when I wanted to do this, I wanted to show how there's just a bunch of fights where these rounds can really affect. Obviously, if they affect the overall fight, then it's the biggest injustice, which I believe happened in the Santos fight. But these scorecards, I know they don't matter in a sense, but they do matter because they can kind of affect, in a way, they can almost affect how these fights are scored. A good example of that would be, I believe, if I can remember, Angela Lee's last fight, Donald Cerrone versus Pettis, Figgy versus Brandon Moreno. I mean, if you look at those scorecards, they're bad scorecards. They're just bad scorecards, and hopefully this gets looked at, and this gets better. I just want these judges to do better, because if you look at a lot of these judges, they're like staples. They've been here. Mike Bell, Chris Lee, Tony Weeks. I don't know how long he's been here. Ron McCarthy, Saul D'Amato. I mean, these guys have been. All these guys are all Vegas guys. They should be doing this well. Essentially, they get like weeks every single week. They get practice. Now, obviously, thankfully, they didn't get any practice in these prelim fights because everything was a KO, TKO submission. But imagine if those fights didn't go. we'd see a lot. We'd see a lot of stupid stuff, man. We'd see a lot of 10-8s, probably more 10-8s. We'd see some bad scorecards. And it just wouldn't be right to fight. I don't know if this affects the fighter in any way by giving a shitty scorecard, but it makes it look as though the fighter got dominated when that's just not the case. Another point, there was a suggestion even during the commentary that maybe we should show the scorecards above. I get the idea. I understand to where the fighter is notified. The problem with that, though, is you probably would get some fighters that are complacent and go, I'm winning. I'll just write it out. And then you might get some fighters that put themselves in danger and go, I'll just go for the finish. I have to go for the finish. I'm down 10-8 now because Derek literally scored me a 10-8. Or this stupid judge scored me. Like, imagine looking at the board and going, that's a 10-8? The fuck? I need to go out there and go crazy for this guy who can't score? No, it's absolutely terrible. It's absolutely terrible. I'm glad that this card happened to where not enough judges could really put their stamp of approval on it. And that's about it. Thank you for listening. I hope everyone is doing well. And best of luck.